Welcome in. In this video, what happens if we buy 700K Zbcn today? We will analyze it. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and please watch till the end to understand.
But first, let's analyze Zbcn. First of all, the descending trend structure that appears on the chart is one of the most important signals showing that the price is currently under pressure in the eyes of investors and that sellers continue to dominate. The fact that the price remains below this descending trend line indicates that the market is still being driven by sellers and that buyers have not yet gathered enough strength. However, the critical point here is that this trend line must eventually be broken to the upside, because a trend line is one of the most important visual guides that determine the direction of price movement, and breaking above it is actually a sign of a major shift in market psychology. Moving above the descending trend means investors see that buyers are starting to take control rather than sellers. That is why a daily or weekly close above the descending trend is interpreted as an extremely critical breakout for the beginning of a new bullish rally. The descending trend line is actually formed by connecting previous highs, and every time the price reaches this line, it shows that sellers step in. In other words, this line is like a barrier, representing that sellers are still active in the market and maintaining their pressure. Whenever the price encounters this barrier, it usually retreats, as much of the market sees this line as a selling opportunity. But at some point, the power of these sellers breaks, and buyers enter the market with much greater strength. In this case, the breakout of the descending trend line is not just a technical situation, but also a sign of a psychological transformation. Because when investors see this breakout, they begin to think that the downtrend is over and a new bullish cycle has begun. With the breakout of the descending trend, the new momentum that forms in the market is often a sign of a much faster rise. This is because investors who have been under pressure for a long time see the breakout as an opportunity and start buying. In addition, traders who follow technical analysis prefer to open positions during such trend breakouts. As a result, a collective buying behavior emerges in the market and the price quickly moves upward. This also increases the likelihood that the uptrend will be sustainable, especially when consistent closes are made above the descending trend line. It shows that the price has entered a new upward channel. In other words, it is not just a trend breakout, but also the beginning of a new trend. In addition, breaking the descending trend also helps restore investor confidence, because a price remaining below the trend line is usually associated with fear and uncertainty. Investors during this period consider the possibility of the market falling further and act cautiously. However, once the price breaks above this line, the perception completely changes. Fear gives way to hope and expectations. With the breakout of the descending trend, investors know that the probability of the market moving upward has increased and shape their positions accordingly. That is why staying above the descending trend provides not only technical, but also emotional relief. The emphasis that the price must rise above the descending trend line is important for exactly this reason. Because a price that cannot move sustainably above the descending trend line, unfortunately, cannot truly begin a bullish trend. Even if there are short-term rises, they usually end at the trend line and the price pulls back again. But once it is seen that the descending trend line is broken upward, then a new story begins to be written. The rises are no longer temporary but take on a permanent nature. This increases investor interest in the market and lays the groundwork for the price to gain value much faster. At this point, another important factor to pay attention to is volume. A breakout of the descending trend accompanied by an increase in trading volume is one of the most important confirmations of the breakout strength. Because a breakout that occurs only on low volume can often be misleading, but a breakout supported by rising volume shows that investors are truly entering the market and buying. This strongly confirms that the breakout will be lasting. That is why it is not only important for the price to move above the descending trend line, but also for this move to be supported by strong volume. On the other hand, it is also common for the price to make a retest after the trend breakout. That is, the price first rises above the trend, then pulls back to test this line. If during this test, the price does not fall back below the line and continues upward, it is a sign that the uptrend will be much stronger. Investors patiently watch this retest process and shape their positions accordingly, because this provides additional confirmation that the breakout is truly solid. As a result, the rises that follow the trend breakout become much more lasting and long-term. While emphasizing the need to rise above the descending trend line, it is possible to say that this is actually a turning point for the future of the market, because this breakout is not just a technical level, but a moment when market psychology completely changes. Investors who once feared a decline are replaced by those who are hopeful for a rise. This shift is the most important factor in determining the direction of the market. That is why breaking above the descending trend is considered one of the moves that can change the fate of a market. In conclusion, while the descending trend line shows that the price is currently under pressure, breaking above it signals the beginning of a new era. Without this breakout, it is not possible to speak of a sustainable uptrend. But once the price surpasses this line, a strong bullish period begins both technically and psychologically. This increases investor confidence, boosts buying appetite, and paves the way for the price to move upward rapidly. That is why saying the price must rise above the descending trend line is one of the most critical rules in technical analysis, because this step represents the most important threshold that opens the door to a new rally. But we cannot base analysis solely on trends, so let's take a look at other metrics as well. Stay tuned.
In Elliott wave theory, the third wave is generally considered the strongest and longest wave in the market. According to this theory, price movements develop within a trend as 5 main impulse waves followed by 3 corrective waves. This process begins with the first wave, experiences a brief pause with the second wave correction, and then gains its real momentum with the explosion of the third wave. At the point you mentioned, if the price transitions into the third wave, reaching at least the 2.272 Fibonacci extension level, which is calculated as $0.017, represents an approach that is fully aligned with the fundamental rules of technical analysis. This is because, in the third wave, the price not only surpasses the length of the previous wave, but also, fueled by market participants' enthusiasm, goes further and typically extends to the 1.618, 2.0, or 2.272 levels. The specific emphasis on 2.272 signals that the third wave is not merely a standard rally, but a clear indication that the market has entered a powerful trend momentum. The third wave is a wave of confidence for all market participants. While investors who bought in the first wave may have doubts during the second wave, once the third wave begins, those doubts are replaced by certainty. At this stage, news begins to turn positive, trust in the project grows across social media and investor communities, and trading volumes expand. Therefore, the likelihood of the price reaching $0.017 is not just a mathematical calculation, but also a psychological reality. The 2.272 Fibonacci extension level is the numerical reflection of market demand and enthusiasm. If the price rises to this level, it shows that despite profit-taking by early investors, new participants are quickly entering the market, fresh capital is flowing in, and momentum is nearing its peak. The $0.017 level can also be considered a critical technical threshold. At this point, the minimum target of the third wave is achieved. This serves as a kind of confidence zone for the market. Once the price reaches this level, the Elliott wave rules are fulfilled, and most analysts expect further price increases. In fact, the third wave not only meets its minimum target.
As an investor, when we consider buying 700,000 Zbcn today, it is quite important to analyze the numbers step by step in order to understand its potential for the future. First, when calculating our capital, multiplying 700,000 by the current price of 0.004 gives us a cost of $2,800. In other words, at today's price level, the amount of money we need to invest is only $2,800. This figure is not a very large capital when we think about crypto markets, because some investors are able to add assets worth millions of dollars to their portfolios. What stands out here is that with a relatively small investment, one can obtain a significant profit potential in the medium term. Because our target price is the 0.017 level, and when this price target is reached, the value of the 700,000 tokens we hold will be 700,000 times 0.017, which equals $11,900. This means that with an initial investment of $2,800, there is a possibility of earning a substantial return of $11,900 in the future. The difference here points to nearly a 4.3x increase, which is considered a very satisfying rise in the crypto world. When we analyze this table in depth, the first result that emerges is that a patient investor who makes a purchase at the right point can catch a serious profit opportunity. Because buying at the 0.004 level essentially means joining the project at a point that the broader masses have not yet noticed. In cryptocurrencies, it is usually those who act early and buy while the price is still at the bottom who later make the biggest profits when the wider investor base discovers it. A similar situation can be seen here. Buying at the 0.004 level is like joining a marathon right at the starting line. The investor takes on the risk at this stage, but the reward potential is equally high. Because when the targeted 0.017 level is reached, the gain obtained multiplies the value of what initially seemed like a small investment. It is also important not to overlook the psychological side of things. Investing $2,800 today may be an achievable amount for many investors. But when the price reaches 0.017 in the future, an investor who wants to buy 700,000 tokens all at once would have to pay $11,900. In other words, the person who buys now adds the same number of tokens to their portfolio at a much more affordable price. This situation can be described as an early purchase advantage in the investment world. The investor essentially benefits from tomorrow's prices today, and when the price rises in the future, new investors will no longer have the same opportunity. That is why investments made at the right time provide not only numerical but also psychological advantages, as the investor feels they have positioned themselves in the right place at the right time. From another perspective, this investment scenario also clearly shows the balance between capital size and the return to be obtained. Reaching a value of $11,900 with a relatively small amount like $2,800 provides the investor with a high proportional return. Such a ratio is rarely seen in traditional investment instruments. For example, in stocks or bonds, the potential for a 4x profit in such a short time is extremely rare. This shows why the opportunities offered by cryptocurrencies remain attractive to investors. Of course, this potential profit also comes with risk, because there is no guarantee that the price will rise to 0.017, but looking at the past dynamics of the market, such targets by no means are impossible. Especially in projects like Zbcn, which are still in development and going through listing stages on various exchanges, price movements can sometimes be sharp. Investors who can benefit from these sharp movements may multiply their capital several times over. Another important point is the portfolio value that the future price level offers the investor. If an investor buys 700,000 tokens today by investing $2,800, when the targeted price of 0.017 is reached, the total value of their portfolio increases significantly. A portfolio that reaches $11,900 can actually be one of the steps an investor takes towards financial freedom, because the investor can either cash out this profit and add it to their daily life, or transfer it to other projects and diversify their capital. So this investment is not only a profit opportunity, but also a move that opens the door to different financial planning in the future. Those who manage their savings wisely can build a large capital base over time with such opportunities. Another dimension that should be emphasized here is how market psychology will be shaped. When the price rises from 0.004 to 0.017, many new investors will show interest in the project and realize that they are late. At this point, the early investor comes out ahead both financially and emotionally, because not only has their money increased, but they have also proven to themselves that they read the market correctly. This strengthens the sense of confidence and encourages the investor to take bigger steps in the future. In short, a journey that begins with $2,800 turning into $11,900 provides not only financial gain, but also strategic self-confidence. When the investor thinks with a long-term perspective, the role of such opportunities in portfolio management is great, because every investor knows that not all assets rise at the same time. Some remain stable, some lose value, but some appreciate unexpectedly quickly. When the 0.017 target projected for Zbcn is achieved, a significant part of the portfolio draws strength from this gain. Thus, the investor gains leverage to grow their total capital. Especially in the crypto market, such projects function like a stepping stone for the investor. The first small steps form the basis for larger investments in the future. The 700,000 tokens bought today for $2,800, when they reach $11,900 in the future, open the door to new opportunities. The investor can either distribute this money among different cryptocurrencies or hold long-term while waiting for bigger goals. One of the most striking aspects of this scenario for the investor is that the balance between risk and reward is relatively advantageous, because an initial capital of $2,800 is an amount that, if lost, will not cause major destruction for many people. But when this amount is invested in the right project at the right time, it can multiply several times over. In other words, while the loss potential is limited, the profit potential is quite high. Such opportunities are not always found in the investment world. In traditional markets, it is usually difficult for investors to earn big profits without putting up large capital. But in the crypto market, it is possible to capture big opportunities with small amounts. That is why this scenario drawn specifically for Zbcn clearly explains why investors are still interested in this market. In conclusion, an investor who sets out today with a $2,800 investment to buy 700,000 Zbcn can have a portfolio worth $11,900 when the targeted price of 0.017 is reached. This is not only a numerical increase, but also an indication that the investor is strategically positioned at the right point. On one hand, the investor has the chance to more than quadruple their capital. On the other hand, they gain a strong foundation to evaluate future opportunities. This step taken today becomes an important move that prepares tomorrow's financial freedom. Providing both psychological confidence and financial profit, this investment, when combined with the right timing and patience, opens the investor's path and brings them one step closer to their goals.
Yes, friends, I hope you liked the video. If you subscribe to my channel and like the video, more videos will be coming. Be careful in your investments, analyze the risk correctly, and always take strategic steps. I will be with you with different analyses, investment opportunities, and technical information in my videos. I wish you all a lot of profit. See you soon.